grown accustomed to getting by on scraps. My first real job after college was the editor of the Daily Guide, a small newspaper in Waynesville, Missouri, a quirky military town in the Ozarks. My role was to run the newsroom and fill the paper with content 5 days a week. With one sports reporter and one designer to support me, I was 22 years old, insecure and wildly ill-equipped. I had never lived outside of Kansas or more than 30 minutes away from my parents, but I dreamed of one day living on a coast. Waynesville was like testing the waters to see if I could get by in a place where I didn't know anyone. Later, I'd come to understand why I got such a big job in spite of my limited experience. Newspapers were in an uncertain, precarious place. Reporters and editors were losing their jobs. Papers were consolidating and shutting down. Print was pivoting to digital. Veteran journalists were taking buyouts. Gatehouse Media, the corporate overlords of the Daily Guide, and hundreds of other newspapers and community publications nationwide, had a type when it came to new hires. They liked them cheap and hungry, willing to do whatever it took to make it work with minuscule budgets and outsized responsibilities. They made a bet, since I was a single, child-free journalism major who accepted such a low starting salary, I'd put up with grueling 60-hour work weeks, no support, and countless disgruntled readers who would show up at the office to complain to my face. And for a time, they were right, until they weren't. From the beginning at the Guide, I was in over my head. I struggled to get my bearings and figure out what to cover each day. Faxes seemed to be the main form of communication from many local institutions, and they came in at all hours. My first sports reporter was sullen and insubordinate, and folks from the community were quick to voice their displeasure about typos, tiny errors, or stories they just didn't like. We had one reader who at least once a week took the print edition of the paper and marked it up in red pen, circling all of the mistakes she found. She would leave it in our mailbox with rude comments scrawled in the margins. I cried often, and I got pretty good at hiding it. My office had old blinds that I'd pull closed so I could sit at my desk and weep in privacy. But there were a few bright spots. At a Chamber of Commerce luncheon my early weeks on the job, I met the mayor, Luge Hardman, who would become my first source in journalism and a longtime friend. Luge was a retired history teacher who acted like an unofficial fixer for me in Waynesville. Shortly after the lunch, she suggested I do a memorial profile on a former city councilor who had recently died. I was reluctant to contact his family. I didn't want to impose. So Luge called his wife, and the next day, the wife called me. It was an important lesson in the dynamics of connecting with a grieving family or crime victim. I'd never have to cold call anyone in a vulnerable state if I first earned the trust of a second-degree friend or relative. Over the 2 years I worked at the Guide, I also got used to constant disappointments from Gatehouse Corporate. I had to fight for every resource I requested, a budget for freelancers, a new camera, simple things I needed to do my job. It was such a hassle to expense things and get turned down that I quickly stopped trying. I just ate the cost and did everything myself. In the meantime, I learned execs at Gatehouse routinely gave themselves huge bonuses while the company was drowning in debt. If I hadn't been so miserable, I probably would have given a bit more thought to my next move. But when an editor at Commercial News in Danville, Illinois, cold emailed me one day with a job offer, I jumped. Danville was a once booming factory town that had fallen on hard times. It consistently ranked among the most dangerous cities in the Midwest due to its high crime rate.